Hello, everybody, and welcome to the House Salt Book Club. This is the live show for October, and it is going to be, I'm going to preface and just start, this is going to be pure chaos, okay? Because we picked Dune, even though we weren't all convinced that we wanted to read Dune. So some of us read, some of us watched the movie, some of us did adaptations, and between us, we're going to have some kind of conversation about Dune. So I'm Marines. My channel name is Marines. I DNF'd the book at about 50%, and I watched the movie, and I would give that like a C+.
Oh, okay. Hey, I'm Sam from Thoughts on Tomes. You're on my channel. I finished the book. Unlike everybody else here, I just found out. And I was the one bitching the most about how we wouldn't have enough time. So I suffered for you all. Praise me. And I haven't watched the movie yet because I don't know if I want to watch it in theaters or on HBO Max. So,
what did you give the book? How many
stars? 2 stars.
Great.
Hello, I am Paige, formerly Minimal Bookie, now Paige Felicia on YouTube. I am the one that suggested this book. Did not finish it, got to page 88, which is barely anything, and I watched the movie, but I did really enjoy the movie. That would be like a 4 out of 5 for me. I might go back to the book eventually, but it was a lot.
Hi, I'm Connor. My channel's just Connor O'Brien. I got very close to the end. I was very, very close, but I have not finished yet. But I started really liking it, and then as I read more, I started liking it less and less. So right now it's sitting at like a 3.5, 3. Okay. But I haven't watched the movie yet, so we'll see how that compares eventually.
I'm Jordan. My channel is the Jordan Journals. I checked out the book and the audiobooks from the library like 7 times, and then I just accepted that I was never going to try it. So I went for the graphic novel instead, which is only the first third of the book. It's book 1 of the book, and the beginning I really enjoyed. I gave this like a 4 out of 5 stars. Thought it was really fun, and I have watched the movie as well, and I really enjoyed the movie, and I give that like a 4 out of 5 stars as well.
Maybe the graphic novel was the way to go. Maybe I should do that.
But I didn't have like the later parts that you said you didn't like. I didn't have them. I didn't read them.
It was a strong start. When I started reading the book, I was like, oh, like this is fine. Mm-hmm. Like it is not quite my brand of like sci-fi fantasy because it is like super heavy on the world building. But I was like, I can do this, and then it just kept going and going, and I started like not even disliking. I didn't feel anything about the characters. Mm-hmm. So that's why I was kind of like, I cannot do this to myself. Mm-hmm. So I don't even know where to start. I guess I wholesale feelings about the story. And here's where I am, both movie and book. I feel like I have no connection to any of the characters. And it was like spectacle with no soul is how I feel about the story in general.
Mm-hmm. I pretty much agree with you. I had a very similar experience. When I first started reading it, I was like, oh, this isn't that bad. I don't know why everyone's complaining about how bad this is, because it's really like the beginning is not horrible. You get introduced to characters. As characters started dying, when we had no connection to them. So I'm like, this is so like, I don't care. And so when like all the characters started dying, there's really no character. There's not a lot of like developed characters or complexity there, in my opinion, in this first book. And I just felt like it was very soulless in that way. So, and then the last, I'm so sorry, I'm talking, so I have to keep talking, even though she's barking. The last like third or whatever, basically after they're in the desert and it was like the time jump, that's when I started to really start like hating it. Like this is actively not fun anymore. Not that it's supposed to be fun, but like it's lost any kind of attachment that I have to it whatsoever at that point.
Yeah, I definitely agree with what Sam said. Like I was kind of on board because it was like tropes that I like. I love heavy world building. I like the Chosen One trope. So I was enjoying all of that getting set up. I'm like, how is this going to play out? Mm-hmm. And then once like shit started hitting the fan and the character started dying off, and I feel like we were supposed to care about each death as it happened, I didn't really care for anybody. And then I also felt like the antagonists were very like mustache twirly, and I was like, you're not making me like feel like you're cool at all. Like, I feel like
Mhm.
the villains are supposed to be someone that you kind of are like, whoa, they're really evil. But in this book, they were just kind of like, I'm going to take over the world.
Yes.
Yeah. So like, oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just gonna say, I feel like it was more interested in like discussing theories and ideas than it was about the actual characters. Like the characters were stand-ins for things that he wanted to explore, and I just like. I didn't like the way the chapters were set up. One, because there's no like chapter numbers, anything to keep track of. And also he changes perspectives all the time. And I was so confused the first couple of chapters being like, who am I reading about right now? I don't understand anything. And that's why I stopped, because I was like, this is too hard to focus on. I want to read something light and fluffy. And so I then read 2 other books instead of this one.
Yeah.
All I was going to say is that, like, because the graphic novel is only like the first third of it, I really like enjoyed it because it was that like beginning stuff where you're like setting up the world building. It does kind of drop you into the graphic novel. I assume the book kind of is the same thing. So it took me a while to get my feet under me, but I really liked the way that they did the graphic novel. I'm not a huge graphic novel reader, so like I don't know if it's like a good graphic novel, but I enjoyed it. I thought it was fun. The art style and the way that they like depict things is really similar to how it's done in the movies. I don't know if they worked together to do it, but I was watching the movie. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's exactly how they drew it in the graphic novel. So that was really cool too.
Yeah, the third person omniscient, as far as like this, no. I mean, I don't know if that's just how things were written, like in this, I don't know if that was like, but what? Just the fact that like, I think that's what made it sort of cold, is like that you don't have anyone's particular perspective. They all just like know things. And I get that like Paul is supposed to know things, but like they all are like, I could see that his face meant this. And it's like, just, I mean, tell me in that perspective that he meant, I don't know. It was just like, that was super messy. And yeah, like the complete lack of connection to any of the characters, which I think some of the characters could have been really cool. And then when I found out who some of the characters were being played as, I was like, they're gonna kill Jason Momoa. Like, why should I even watch this? I don't even understand.
I'm jumping the gun here, but I literally watched this at home, and we can talk about the difference between like home versus theater. What would be the best? So I watched this at home, and I got to the battle scene, and everybody started dying, and I just paused and went to sleep because I was like,
I'm mad.
Anyways,
yeah.
The whole perspective thing, I love third person omniscient, but I don't love like head hopping. So like you can still have limits on who, like what you're, whose head you're in or whatnot. But it was the constant head hopping that got to me, especially because it kind of for one, I watched the movie first and then I read it, so I knew what was happening. But the
doctor.
What?
Sorry.
Gosh, what was I saying? The head hopping. Oh, I watched the movie first and then I read the book, so I had spoilers, but there was no tension in his writing because, first of all, at the beginning of every chapter, he has like some like excerpts from a book written from the future, and he just spoils whatever the chapter is. And this person who is dead now. So, and I'm like, well, okay, thanks for telling me. And secondly, it would be like somebody would say something and the text would be like, and I knew he was lying. And then it would hop into that person's head and they would be like, and I was lying.
Yes.
Where's the tension?
Yeah.
Like you're not, everything was so spelled out that I had no connection. Like it was just like, whatever.
Yes. Go ahead.
I really wish they had just avoided the POV of the doctor completely, because that would have been kind of a cool, like, who is going to betray everyone. And it would have made like the conversations between the different characters, like the like assassin guy and his like suspicion of Jessica, like way more compelling, because you wouldn't know ahead of time that it was the doctor that betrayed everyone. I mean, it was very heavy-handed where they're like, it can't be the doctor, but like I wish his POV was cut completely, because it would have made it way more entertaining at the beginning.
In the movie,
the movie did it horribly because they show him in the background, and then all of a sudden he's the one that's betraying them. We're supposed to care. That was the one part of the movie I was like, they completely botched this because
They like went the opposite direction. So in the book, it's like the doctor, and in the movie, it was kind of like the doctor, and I was like, who
is this person? Oh my god! The other thing about that, like, the way that they did like sort of the reveals and stuff is like with the whole Jessica thing and everyone thinking it was Jessica, they didn't put any substance to that, because every time like they'd be like, I've hated Jessica because she was the one that betrayed us, and then it's like, oh no, she wasn't, and they're like, okay, like there's no like there's no like, no, I don't believe you, there's no tension. So it's like, why even set up everyone thinking that Jessica did it if they don't even do anything when they find like find Jessica? Like, what is even the point of doing that, of that choice?
This felt so much better done in the graphic novel, just because there was no exposition, so I didn't have to read any of that. Like you were, you are head hopping because you're in a graphic novel, and that's like how they're normally written. So like you'd have little text bubbles of them with their thinking and stuff. And the doctor was kind of let out in the beginning that he might have some like ulterior motives because he's talking about his wife, but doesn't like plainly say like, I'm sabotaging you because of my wife.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like a little bit more peppered in throughout rather than just like blatantly stated. So I enjoyed that.
Is the best adaptation of this book is the one with the least amount
of information in it.
Because think of the fact that I only read 88 pages and I knew the doctor was the person who was going to betray them. I haven't even gotten that far into the betrayal yet.
Immediately. I feel like the first chapter, they're like, the doctor betrays this family, and you're like,
it's in one of the
cool.
excerpt. It's in the excerpt.
Yes, one of the excerpts.
It's like, cool, thank you.
I can't.
Or I could have just missed it. Sometimes I miss things. I could have just missed that. No, I'm like,
no, did I miss it? I'm sure the graphic novel did it better. Don't worry. The best thing, okay, so as an adaptation, when we start the movie, they have a lot of more like exposition up at the beginning of like, this is spice, this is the world, and it explains everything. And so when I went to the book and it starts just with the pain box, the hand in the pain box, I was like, oh,
yep.
Okay, so the book did a lot less exposition, but then the next like chapter is like the Duke or whatever, the bad guy, just sitting with his nephew and being like, explain our entire evil plan. And I was like, I take it back.
I take it.
The movie actually did the explaining of the world and all of that much better than the book did.
I felt a little bit more natural too, because it's at the beginning, like you're getting dropped into this new fantasy world. It's like, well, this is this. It felt a little bit more natural than like after the opening scene.
And like part of it is too, like it's a visual medium, so they show you a lot of things that you're described in like the way that the lights were described. I was hung up on the way that everything was described in the world, because it was just very long sentences to describe these mundane things, versus like when you're watching the movie, it's just stuff that you consume passively so you can pay attention to the actual plot that's happening.
Yeah, I mean, even the description of the world, though, like I know people are like, this is such a world building heavy book, and like in ways it is, with like sort of like the ecology and whatever, and like I guess the different political factions, but like I'd pictured nothing. I pictured sand the whole time. The whole time. And so when everyone's like, oh, it looks just like they described it in the book, I'm like, I had nothing. If they could have given me anything, they could have set them in Lord of the Rings, and I'd be like, yes, absolutely, that's exactly how it looked.
Because it looks just like the graphic novel.
I could not absorb any of what they were talking about. So it was like very world building heavy again with the ecology and whatever, but at the same time it like wasn't. And the fact that there's a whole fucking like appendix or glossary or whatever that you basically have to use because they don't provide any context within the story. I specifically didn't use the glossary because I'm like, no, fuck you. Put your context in the actual book and I will go back there if I need like additional content. But don't make me have to flip to a glossary to know what this word is.
No, somebody brought up just now in the chat that they listened to the audio book. So I also was like listening to the audiobook while I was reading my Kindle. And so they have a full cast audiobook version, and it is unabridged, but because it's different actors reading the voices, they will cut a lot of the like she said, and then they just read the dialogue straight, which also helped a lot. I was like, ooh, yay, cutting words. So if you're going to read this, I do recommend the audiobook because full cast always helps, and it also kind of cuts out some of that fillery stuff. So okay. I think frustrating thing about some of this for me, the experience, is that I think we've all mentioned that there were like parts that were interesting where I would feel myself be like pulled back in again. So I want to talk about if there were any like strong points for you or things that you were like moments that you were more invested in, or like what's the good here, because we can talk about the bad for a long time. So let's focus on the good for a little bit. Anything that you thought was a positive.
I kind of liked whenever they were talking about how their plans to change the planet were like slow, like gradually forming, and their first thing was like they want to cover the Earth so that it can like maintains moisture, and like how they're gathering the moisture was interesting. Like they have the like special stones or whatever that get extra cold, and then because of that have more moisture when it warms up or whatever. So I thought those things were interesting because I like have been really into gardening recently, and the thing that they tell you is cover the earth with something. That's why people mulch. So I thought that was interesting.
Okay, not so much. Well, I was okay with the ecology stuff. Like I wanted her little like plant biome thing that she had in the like main place. Like that seems cool. The things that I was actually interested in were Jessica, highlight. I love Jessica. Queen, love her. I think she should be the main character. Her and Leto romance, love to see it. Very sweet. Wanted more. What the hell? Then like when everyone dies and they're in the desert and they're kind of figuring things out, that was kind of interesting. Like when they're like kind of running from things or whatever. Everything after that I really didn't like. Yeah. So Jessica.
Period.
Yep.
So in the chat, somebody brings up about the epigraphs being written from the future and like showing how history is biased. I totally get why they were there. And I am somebody who loves chapter openings, quotes, or anything, chapter titles that are witty. The reason I didn't like them was because they were just spoiling it, because everything was so overdone and overwritten that there was no tension in the writing. And that just that became like an additional thing, that he was like telling us ahead of time what was happening and just telling us so much that I just
it would have worked better if they were at the end.
Yes, or I don't know,
or at the beginning of like the next pair. I don't know. Like I don't know how you work that in, but
There
like
they were just that, but his writing was tighter, and he wasn't like telling us 10 times when everybody was lying, and like just letting some tension exist in his writing.
Yes, or not having them before every chapter. Like you're saying, we don't have a problem with the actual like having that. It's like, look at how history and shapes it, and he's become like a person that's not even really real. He's become this sort of like religious entity. We get that part. We're not missing that part. It's the fact that like you don't need to add the spoilers into it. Like there were plenty of them that weren't spoilers, so just don't put those in there, and we still get it.
Yeah,
like, we don't need it. You don't need to be like so heavy-handed with it every single time. So yeah, because I still like some of those of like, oh, let's see how this kind of like goes in the future. Cool, giving us some of that. But yeah, you don't need the spoilers in them.
I also like when they're especially vague and you don't know how they connect until the very end or upon a reread. I like those.
Yes, exactly. Yes, I love having like epigraphs or whatever they're called. Like I think they can really add something here. I think they took away in this case in a lot of ways.
That's exactly what it was. Like they can be additive, but here I think they're just sort of like distracting, and it highlighted. It wasn't their fault. It was everything else that the like writing was doing, but this just like highlighted what the problem was.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
So how did you guys feel about Paul? I know, Sam, you already said Jessica should have been the main character.
Yeah. So Paul, okay. First off, we need to make the joke and get out of the way that like the names in here are just really funny, because like I get that like Paul and Luke Skywalker, like it's a very similar thing. I get that. However, Paul and Jessica and Duncan, Idaho, okay. Please. So that was a little bit ridiculous. But yeah, Paul, I didn't so much mind at the beginning. I don't think he's written like a 15-year-old. You don't necessarily need to.
He's only 15?
Yes, he's 15.
At the beginning.
At the beginning.
Wow.
And I mean, like, and I guess, yeah, and at the end, he's only 18.
Yeah.
And he has like a whole baby, and he's married, and like, I mean, not really married. He's not technically married, but they're married in their hearts. Anyway, so like he doesn't act like a teenager. And I get that there's probably some arguments of like, oh, because all of his training and whatever, it makes him so much older. teenagers are still teenagers. Like, have him at least sometimes be a bit of a teen. Like, otherwise, write him as an adult. And there were definitely parts that, like, I still pulled for him at parts and whatever. But I do think, as far as complexity of a character, that he is less so than someone like Jessica. I think the Bene Gesserit in general are like the strongest characters in here. And I also am annoyed that we have this, I've watched a lot of like Dune explanation content in the last couple of weeks just to kind of see what like the fandom thinks about it. And so many people will be like, the Bene Gesserit are the most powerful, they're the most complex, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so why is their prophet a man? Why is their chosen one a fucking man then? If they're like the most powerful, like, it just kind of undoes some of that by being like, these women are the most powerful, but their most powerful one is a man. Like, get fucked. Anyway.
Isn't the Wheel of Time kind of like that too?
Yes.
I haven't read it, and that's another reason not to.
It is. It absolutely is. It's like all the men aren't allowed to have power because it corrupts them. So all of the women are the power holders, except for
the main character.
Yes, that's true. It undoes that. Like, because a lot of people are like, look, this, Dune's not about, like, it isn't sort of a male-centered book because it has all these women as the most powerful. I'm like, except for your chosen one. Except for your.
Okay, so we're talking about. There's a lot of things. This was written in what was it, like 1965?
80 something.
So,
oh,
yeah.
What is it?
No, it's the 60s.
64.
60s.
64.
Yeah.
65.
Okay.
It is very dated, and
Totally.
so it is difficult to come to this story now as an adult and in the year 2021. But the thing with women especially bothered me because even though the Bene Gesserit were like super powerful, all of the like story around like the role of women as like the wife and the mother and the concubine, like it was so forced that I couldn't, like, even with Jessica, I was like, oh my God, they kept like beating us over the head with that specific role of horrors, and I didn't like it. I didn't like the vibes around women in this story. Is what I'm saying.
Totally. Yeah, someone said in the comments that Paul was supposed to be a female, but Jessica defied her order. Yes, but if he would have been female, he wouldn't have been the chosen one. The chosen one is still supposed to be a man. That didn't change anything. He wasn't actually supposed to come at this point. So yeah, it's still like that doesn't impact any of it. But yeah, there's some really, just like and again, yes, I get it's dated, I get that it's from the 60s or whatever, but I think the reason that we're having this conversation about Dune 2 is because people still say like but you have to ignore all of that because it's a canon, blah blah blah, and it's influenced so much. Sure, we can also move past the need for Dune. We can say it did so much, blah blah blah, but we've moved past it. But a lot of people are like, no, you have to love it because okay, it did a thing during its time. It's been like 50, 60 years now. Like, we can let it go.
Yeah. I really struggled with the whole Paul thing because it's this, people say that this is like kind of like a white savior trope or whatnot. And it doesn't do race well. And there are like a lot of things about like the appropriation and whatnot. But you can tell that there is like a sense that it was like supposed to be like a subversion thing, or at least there was like commentary about how they were like playing with eugenics to get to Paul and how weird and creepy that was. And even Paul's like, this is weird. Like, I don't want to be at the head of a holy war. Like, and so there was a lot of that commentary that I was trying to appreciate because it was trying to say something. But unfortunately, there was so much other commentary about like the indigenous people being like backwards, and like even their religion, it was like all propaganda and like taking away sort of the ownership of their own beliefs in the religions from the indigenous people and whatnot, and putting it on like the propaganda of the Bene Gesserit. Like, there were so many other details that were not great to the indigenous people, and sort of the way that this is supposed to be modeled about like the oil wars in the Middle East. Like, none of those details were great, so I couldn't give it cookies for like the few times it subverted like the white savior thing. So
yeah, I saw like a tweet that was sort of saying like it wanted to have its cake and eat it too. It wanted to be about subverting these tropes while still using these tropes without really challenging them too much.
Totally.
Because you look at everything that has been based on Dune, it has literally carried none of the examination of these tropes and only carried the tropes with them, and you have to wonder why that's what people have taken from the story versus like looking at the way the Bene Gesserit have like use their like culture to like implant these religious elements and stuff like that. Like that was the part I enjoyed, was them trying to subvert and examine things, especially because it was written in the 60s. I was like, oh, that's cool that they were trying to like subvert the tropes, but at the same time watching the film as well and knowing that like it's going to be mostly people of color who are the Fremen. I was pronouncing it Freeman in my brain while I was reading, so that was a joy to find out that I was pronouncing it wrong. Like seeing him have to kill a person of color in order to be part of their like that entire bit, I was like, the director is not challenging the book and the tropes because he loves it so much, and I was like sort of disappointed that like it could have been done so well if somebody was looking to like make it better than what it had originally been.
And there was also the whole thing with him like being the chosen one is that he's like an even better Fremen than even the Fremens are. Like he's like the best indigenous person, the white man. So every time it's like he fits right in, he knows our beliefs and our customs. I was like, ugh, kill me now.
Yes. And I think the thing too, again, when I'm looking at a lot of the Dune discourse, is people are like, oh, well, that gets fixed in later and you have to read the whole. No, you shouldn't have to read an entire series for some of these like problematic elements to be addressed. There are plenty of books that have things like this in them that address it in narrative within the one work. Like again, we've only read Dune, and so we're only kind of basing it off of Dune. You shouldn't have to be like, no, you have to get to book 4 to really say that the white savior thing is bad. Like heck no, that's not what I have to do. So yeah, it's just like, I get that for its time, it wasn't probably like super progressive for its time, sure. But we're also reading it in the context of 2021, and so we can have these critiques of it.
I with this stuff as well, like I'm sitting in front of my what is this called, Witcher books, right? So there's plenty of fantasy like that does not treat women well. That is awful to women, the whole series. But then when you have series that are like this that have problematic elements, I think the reason that I was like constantly like chirping up against this stuff in Dune is because I also was just not enjoying the writing style, and then also had no connection to the characters. So that's why I DNF'd. I was like, I'm forcing my way through this, but I don't have a touch. If there were Game of Thrones is over here somewhere, and I like forced my way through some of that as well, but that book has some of my favorite characters of all time. And so the parts that were like bad, that I was like, oh, this sucks, I was like skipping ahead to get to Sansa. Like I had something to hold on to. In Dune, nothing.
Yeah, that's where the whole soulless thing comes in, because it is like, if there was something, I think again, like maybe the little bit that sort of was the carrot dangling on a string for me was Jessica, but even towards the end, even she gets a little bit like they barely even utilize her. She almost becomes like her power just really gets diminished in the face of Paul. So yeah, there wasn't a lot. Like I could have liked this. Like I went into it hoping that I would be pleasantly surprised, being like, I'm into sci-fi fantasy, I can hang. And so like the first, like I said, that first 2 parts, I was like, this is okay. Like it was sitting at like a 3.5, 3-star for me. I could have been like, this is very middle of the road. But then yeah, the lack of any connection plus all of the issues make it to where it becomes like insufferable by the end.
All right. I know not everybody has watched the movie, but Paige, you and Jordan liked the movie a lot more than I did. I mean, not a lot more. I thought it was fine. I really liked like the spectacle of it. The cast was obviously wonderful, even though because this is an extended introduction, everybody is criminally underutilized. Like I understand that these people will come back in other version and like later on or whatnot, but just the way that you had these stars and 5 minutes of screen time, I did not understand the crime, right? But it also it just felt like an incomplete movie, like, because it was this like introduction. So tell me about how you felt about it. Good, bad, ugly.
Yeah, I knew going into it that it was only part 1 because I'd seen online somebody was like, yo, like go into it knowing this is not a complete story. So I was like, okay,
I did not know that.
My expectations, make sure that I don't expect it to wrap up neatly. And I realized like it was working better for me as an adaptation because of all the like hangups that I was having reading like everything being described and me having a hard time picturing everything, and I need to picture things when it's like a fantasy or sci-fi because that's half of the reason you're reading it. So seeing all of it, like the visuals of it really helped me like understand the things like of the story. So I sort of felt like it was a very true adaptation, like didn't really change anything. So I was like, okay, I understand what's happening for the first 25 minutes of this movie because I've read it and it's cool to see it on the screen. And then like my friends were saying, because 2 of my friends have already like fully read the books, and that was part of the reason I wanted to read them as well. And they were saying like it gets more plot heavy toward the middle of it, and that's like the part where like the Harkonnens like come and they destroy the entire city, like all of that. I really enjoyed all of that too, because like that was like the most intense moment of the movie. And I just like stories that explore theories and ideas. So I feel like when I was watching it on screen and the exposition was so much better done on screen in like the film, I was there for the journey. I was there to just see like how they're gonna explore all the ideas that they're coming in. And I loved all the like, I feel like it was just a visual experience for me, honestly, because the scene of Jessica stepping off that ship and walking across with like the wind blowing in her costume, I was like, this is stunning. Like it was just like such a pretty visual movie, and like they did all the parts well. Like the story itself, not that great, but all the elements that it took to make the film were so good that I was like, I will watch part 2. This makes me want to read the book because I actually understand what the fuck is happening for once.
Yes, I did not go into it knowing that it was only a portion of the book, but being that I had read the graphic novel, I was like lining up in my head with like what I had like read in the graphic novel, because I knew this was only a third of the book and what was happening in the movie. And I'm like, there is no way that this whole movie is this whole book. Like it just couldn't be possible. But some things I thought really cool is there are like direct lines from the graphic novel, which I'm sure are taken from the book, that they repeat in the movie. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. That was exactly how it was said in the graphic novel. And like I mentioned earlier, the visual way that they everything in the movie was really similar to the graphic novel. So this just recently came out, so I feel like they probably worked on the 2 things at the same time. And so seeing it in the graphic novel and then seeing it on the screen, I agree with Paige. It was just very visually appealing to watch. I was having a hard time following the movie in a couple of parts, like when the Harkonnens, yes. When they invade the planet, I'm like, did I miss something? Why do they want this planet so badly? And when I was, person I was watching with was like, they just want the spice. And I'm like, that's it? That's the whole reason that they're like coming to this planet is for the sand? Like, did I miss something?
See, like that's the part I liked a lot, because it's like political. It's the Emperor being jealous of Atreides because like they're like very popular, and therefore they're using the Harkonnens to like come destroy because they're working together with the Emperor's people. Like all of that stuff was I love political.
I didn't know that. Like watching the movie, I was like, I didn't follow that. And so I mean, I probably just missed it. Sometimes I miss like really small details like that in movies and stuff. And so there were a couple of points where if I was like, I must not have been paying close enough attention, because I was like, I feel like I just missed a huge plot thing. I don't know why we've just like segued here, but I thought the movie was very visually appealing, and where it ended was enough for me to be like, I have to know more. Like these people are sandboarding on a giant worm. Like, please, I need to know how they like what is going on.
I'm glad they get to sandboard, so they get to like ride the worms.
That's pretty far in the book.
It's like sandboarding on
it's
this worm.
hinted.
It's
and then
hinted.
there's like
Okay.
one scene where you see someone on the worm.
Yeah, it's a split second. You like see it over someone's shoulder, and you're like, "Ooh,
You're like, ooh, yes, more of that." Yeah, like the worm riding. I was like, yes, we can get down with that.
Yes, I'm like, I want more of the worm riding. Yes, please.
You reminded me actually of one of my complaints also about the book. Again, with watching a lot of Dune content, I've watched people like explaining the world of Dune, and so there's a couple things that I feel like I didn't get from the book. And let me know. Like now, having heard it, I'm like, oh, I that makes sense. But I don't feel like it was actually properly explained that there was like a war on computers in the past, and that's why they have the the Massat or whatever they're called. I mean, I sort of could have inferred that, I guess. Like the people, the Mentats or whatever they're called.
Yeah, like assassin people.
Yeah,
or whatever.
they're like computer people.
Yeah.
but like they didn't really say in the book that there was like we're scared of
right
computers.
It's right
Is
at
it at the very
It
beginning?
was at the very
At the very
beginning, but
beginning.
horribly explained because I
Yes.
was still confused about what the fuck they were talking
Wait,
about.
there's computer people?
Well,
I
kind
didn't
of.
know
They're
that.
not androids. They're just people that have like
Process, like
sort of
Were they
computers.
the
process
ones
like
that like
computers.
had the
So you know,
like
like the guy in the movie when his eyes flip back and he says like the number of like things that they need to do or whatever. Like
And then
he's one of
Paul
them.
is also one of these people. which
Right,
also
he's because he's
is-
everything. Because
Yes.
Paul's
He's
everything.
everything.
He has to be everything. I never want to hear anyone say like a woman's a Mary Sue ever again. If you like Dune and you like Paul, please take many seats because he gets to be one of like everything. It's ridiculous. So that was the one piece that I didn't get, and then also the fact that spice is what runs their
The ships.
transportation.
Yes.
Didn't just
Okay,
went
all right,
completely.
hold
That's
on.
explained in the movie, like at the
Okay.
very beginning. So
They
you'll
do
get that there.
explain the spice at the very
I missed
beginning. At the exposition, like at the very beginning of the movie, it was like spice powers our intergalactic travel or whatever it is.
Uh-huh.
But it's
Oh.
literally a line right at the beginning of the movie, and so
I
you
don't
just
remember
have
that
to
from the
kind of
book.
carry
Yes.
in your head and your heart
Yes.
that without spice, they wouldn't be able to
Yeah.
travel.
I was
so the
very
part-
much like-
the part of spice that like stuck out to me was the hallucinogenic thing. So
Yes.
I figured it was probably because they wanted it for drugs.
Yes.
But aside from that, I was
on
like,
the drug aspect of it more than it being basically like gasoline. It's like
Yeah.
gas in the Middle East. Like this is oil. You know,
Right.
this is like oil in the Middle East. Is the
Yes.
spice in this?
that makes so much more
Yes.
sense.
But
In the
I
book, I
expected
feel like
that to be more obvious, and they like didn't. They must have just like barely mentioned it, and I'm like, that would have been really important to like really
I don't-
beat me
Because
over
I
the
feel
head
like in the
with.
book they make
One
this
line.
huge
One line.
in the book they make this huge thing about how the organization, whatever it's called,
Chom or whatever.
whatever, that they are the only ones that
You're
are in charge
killing
of people traveling around.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So was it supposed to be a secret that the spice is supposed to be the fuel?
No,
No,
They're
not
the
a
people
secret,
who
they
are
just
in
don't really
charge
tell
of
us.
it. They like
Okay.
own the spice. Like they own, like they're the ones
Right.
that have all the money or whatever.
Okay,
So
and then-
all of the travel in this entire world is with spice. That
So,
it
yes.
consists of
There's a lot
one
of it.
planet.
And they're the only
like,
ones.
That's the only planet.
Intergalactic
Yes.
travel is spice from the one planet.
So
See,
that's
they
why.
harp so much on the fact that it's like poisonous and addictive.
Right. And like I wish they would have like made it really obvious that that's how the travel is done. And some people are probably be like, it was obvious. I'm like, fucking no, it wasn't. Because
Because
like
five people here don't think it was
right,
obvious.
because so when I was watching people describing, and maybe there's more of it in the rest of the series, when I was watching people talk about it, they were like, you know, in this world, there's not a lot of like space travel because there's this one group that like runs all of like the spice. And I was like, oh, you know, like there's not a lot of like exploration and stuff because it's not like everyone can just zip around in their little like starcraft. And I was like, okay, cool.
Gotcha.
Can you please have told me that? And then even just the fact that like apparently the spice makes it so they can like they almost like transport immediately, like they can go to where they need to go just like whoop, instantaneously through the spice. Again, cool detail. That's really awesome. I love that. Why'd I have to watch a 5-part TikTok to know that? That's what I want to know.
The other part that was the people computers, and I was like, no, they mentioned it, but then I remembered that they didn't. I literally when Leda was like, oh, Paul, by the way, you're a men
person.
cat. Yeah, I was like, what the hell is that? And I looked it up and I read a wiki. So
See,
that's
like
why-
they didn't. So I'm like, okay, all of this context is when you have Dune fans, they're like, and I'm like, yes, but that's not in the actual first book. Unless
Mhm.
you like, I guess, read every appendix and do all this stuff, but you shouldn't have to. That should be extra. Like that.
Well, they
that is not
probably
a requirement.
consumed so much content at this point that it
Yes.
Right? They don't
where
even
it
know
came
when.
from.
Where it
does-
came
yeah.
from, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
True.
And it did remind me though, like at the very beginning with the pain box and the like Reverend Mother, where it's like we have to make sure you're not an animal and like you're not a computer, or like there's one line where she
Like I proved you're human, basically.
yes like mentioned
yeah.
something about computers. So after I read the wiki, I was like,
It all makes sense now. It all makes sense now. But you could have used some of those words that you used to just do fuck all, and you could have. Apparently, I'm like really pissed off about this book. I wasn't mad until we started this live show. I haven't talked about it with anybody. Maybe that's why. So you did like hardly anything with all this exposition. You could have used that to like describe some of these cool things about your world a bit more in book 1.
okay. Also, this is like not a segue, but whatever. I said I did not have an emotional connection, but thinking back, I thought that the fact that the Duke, Leto, was like a good dad, I was not expecting it. I was expecting him to be a bad dad. And so when he turned out to be a good dad, it really it made me a little bit emotional, especially because I thought that at least the very apparent fact that they were walking into a trap, that was good. It felt like such a tragedy that everybody was like, it's a trap. What can we do? Like that part of it, I was like, oh my gosh, this sucks really bad. And there really isn't anything that they could do about it. So that part of, and maybe that's why the beginning was so much better, because I felt like that was compelling. Like, what do you do if you're, and they were kind of confident. They were trying to be kind of like, we got this, we're gonna like figure our way. But when it becomes very clear that no, they just stepped into the trap and that was that, I was like, oh man, that sucks. The only little thing I wish they hadn't done was like spoil that in the book, and the Reverend Mother or whatever is like, your dad's gonna die. And I was like, you have to spoil everything before you get there. But otherwise, I thought that portion of the storytelling was at least compelling. And I'm really glad that I got to see Oscar Isaac be a good dad.
Yeah, the one line he has where like you would have done like everything you needed to do, which is like be my son. I was like, I love you so much. But also I was listening to a podcast about Dune because like I'm just gonna consume all the content about it instead of actually reading the book myself.
It doesn't matter. You don't have to. You just have to read the wikis.
Right? You'll get
like,
everything.
Someone made the comparison that it feels very like Ned Stark, like the whole like you have to accept this role that you know is gonna end badly for you and your family. And I was like, that is such a good comparison. Oh my god. So like that's probably why I enjoyed that character. I just enjoyed the family dynamic between Jessica Leto and Paul. Like that was I really enjoyed.
Yes.
I just also wish like with the Reverend Mother, whatever, her like so adamant that the dad was going to die, but then you later on find out through Paul that like all of his visions are like totally all over the place and sporadic, and you can actually kind of forge your own path a little bit. I was like, well, then maybe he didn't have to die. So why were you so sure? Jessica and Leto are like the two that I like the most.
Yes. And in that comparison to sort of being like the Starks, like again, like when we're making that comparison to the lack of like solid sort of character development in this, like when the Starks start getting sort of like stripped away, there's this extra tragedy and you kind of care about all of them. Where in this, as they start to get stripped away, you're like, well, we're losing all the ones I like. So what now?
What now?
Yeah. Why do I care now?
In the movie, Duncan, Idaho is played by Jason Momoa. And so I love Jason Momoa. So such a snap, right? Is he a good actor? I don't know. Everything he plays is just him being imposing and like charming, and he just does it, and you're like, good, you did the thing.
Yeah, great job.
And that's what Duncan Idaho has to do, is like run to Timothée Chalamet and hug him a lot and like, protect him and like be imposing. Great job. But does that come across in the book with the character? Do you like Duncan Idaho?
I
like,
did,
we were close. Yeah, like I liked Duncan Idaho, like from what I saw of him in the book. So I was like very thrilled that it was gonna be Jason Momoa. Also, when he's just like swaggering about being hot. Everybody in this movie is so pretty. That was also part of the reason I probably really enjoyed it.
He gets a little muddled with some of the other characters. There's another character, his name starts with a G. Gurney. Those two characters in my mind kind of get muddled because they kind of have the same role.
They do. Yeah.
So when I was reading and then everyone started dying and like one of them died, I was like, okay, well there's another one.
They do fill a very bad guys. Role. Yeah, the bad guys and all of the like minions, the bad guys, I'm like, these are all the same people. Like I cannot differentiate who any of these people are. And then the only one in the movie that like I really could tell apart was the one that was Bootstrap Bill from Harry Potter, or not Harry Potter, Pirates of the Caribbean. Like, you're Bootstrap Bill. And the other one was like, you're from Guardians of the Galaxy.
Okay. Wait, are those the bad guys, the Harkonnen guys? Is that who you're talking about? Or is this
Yes. Yes. The Baron is played by
Bootstrap. Skarsgård.
Yeah, Skarsgård, but I can't
Skarsgård dad.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then one of his minions, I don't know which one, is played by
from
Yes.
Yeah, Guardians of the Galaxy. Yes. Okay, I saw them in the trailers. I just didn't know who played who.
How
did they do with the villains in the movie?
Did they make him wear a suit?
The fat phobia.
Did they make him wear a fat suit and like
and have to be held up with straps?
They did not change, and that was the one thing where like we were introduced to him, and I was like, "This is you can tell this is of its fucking time," and they changed nothing.
Ouch.
Okay,
about
so
it. It's
I
so
was
bad.
uncomfortable watching, right? When I'm like, I still don't understand. Like, there were two of them, and I didn't know. Again, like Jordan said, like I didn't know who the bad guys were because I watched it first.
Well,
And
there
then
were quite a few bad guys, and I couldn't tell what any of them who
Fair.
they were.
There's the
And they
Baron
made
and
him,
his
like-
nephews.
Yes.
And so, like, whatever. He's floating around and doing his thing, and I was like, this is weird. And then I started reading the book, and all of the fat shaming, and I was like, and then thinking about how it got portrayed in the movie, I was like, they just kept it.
Yep.
in the movie.
Like beat for
It's
it was so
so
bad.
bad.
It was worse in the movie to me. Like reading it was like, oh, he's just like he's fat and it's fat phobic, but in the movie they just like make them look unhuman. Like they're not.
Is
Well,
he
they-
also a
they-
pedophile
Yeah,
Yeah,
in
he's
the
very
movie?
like bulbous. It's very uncomfortable to watch.
Is he
Well,
a
they-
child abuser, pedophile?
Right, is he a pedophile rapist as well? Did they bring that up?
They
all the
no,
time?
they like apparently.
No.
So they take that away.
There's a scene.
But the fat shaming is
Yeah.
like,
Right.
The scene where the Duke dies, like when they're in the room or whatever. I don't know how it is in the book, obviously, because I didn't get that far. But
Yeah.
I was reading online that they took out some of the homophobic elements of like the Duke and the Baron's like interaction in that scene specifically. They were like, we're glad they didn't do that. But apparently, because spoiler alert, Oscar Isaac is completely naked.
I've heard that. I'm
Okay,
very
and during that
excited.
scene,
Yes,
I was
I-
all like,
yeah.
but yeah,
Uh-huh.
it was just very like I did not get any of like that element of the character. It was just a lot of like fat shaming.
What
Yeah,
is
so-
the suit? What is the suit that he's in that makes him float?
It holds
At first,
up
I
all of
thought
his
he had
extra
It
fat.
holds up all of his fat because
Oh.
he's
'Cause he
too
couldn't
big
walk.
to move.
Yeah.
That's why I was
Oh.
horrified.
And they
can't move
At first, I
without
thought
They
he
make
was
that
some
a
kind of like
point.
alien creature that had weird legs.
No,
so-
they make that a point in the book too. So I'm not surprised. They actually did probably pull exactly from the book because every time he was on screen in the book, they're like, his grotesque fatness,
So
his
fat.
bulbous, he cannot move his leg. Like, I'm like, are you serious?
yes.
Like, are we really doing this? And the fact that they did that in the movie still.
Yeah.
But they make it a huge point too
okay,
that his,
again, it just goes back. I feel like we are being a little bit like defensive about this, even though nobody has said anything. But we were, before we joined on the call, we were already anticipating, like, what if Dune fans find this, and what are the consequences?
Yeah.
The Dune fans, listen to me.
Uh-huh.
I understand it was 1965, but it's not anymore.
Right.
I read that with my own eyeballs about like it was so uncomfortable. I was so uncomfortable. I couldn't stand it.
Yeah. And then the fact
I-
that like in 2021 they put it in the movie is also like,
Yes.
And they put it in the movie.
I mean, it looks
But then-
exactly the same in this too. Like it is like the way that they do Stellan Skarsgård in the movie is exactly how it is in the.
And
But
then
it's-
again, like that goes to the fact that the like director of this like movie, he's a huge fan of the book, so of course he's not going to challenge anything because he loves the book so much. And I think like he did so well, but there was a disservice as well because he wasn't able to challenge some of the things that should have been challenged in 2021.
yeah.
Right. I
Yeah.
feel like also they lost with removing the fact that he's like a child abuser and like kills children and like rapes them. Like
Yes, that is not in the movie.
that now he's just like horrible and fat. But before he was
Uh-huh.
horrible, fat, and like also abuses
A
children
pedophile,
and
yeah.
like kills
Mhm.
people and like is weirdly sexually attracted to his grandson. So like that's a whole thing. But they
so
removed it.
upset.
I do.
So upset. And now I'm thinking about like the other stuff in the movie, like the casting and how it just casting all of the people of color as like the indigenous people, sure, but also somebody had mentioned like almost all of them get killed. And then you have Duncan Idaho, who is like on the side with like Paul and them, but he's the one who gets sent to the
Uh-huh.
it's just like they didn't challenge at all.
Wait, where does he get sent in the movie?
He
with
goes
the
with the
Freemen.
Fremen for a bit, like
goes to
he
the
gets sent
Fremen,
ahead.
They're like, oh, you
They do it in the book.
went in with the Fremen.
He's the one that gets sent to the Fremen,
Also,
but
there's
then
like a line in the movie where they go, "You've gone full native" when he brings back some of like the technology of the Fremen, and I was like, "Yo,
Oh,
y'all,
yes.
this is 2021.
Yes.
What the fuck are we doing here? Like, this is so messy and bad." Like,
And they're
Yeah.
like, can you believe it? They have technology.
uh-huh.
And it was like,
I don't remember that. I must have
Yeah,
like
so he's the one that gets sent in the book, but then he comes back, and that's when he dies. Gurney is the
Oh.
one that goes with the smugglers in the book.
Oh, the
and
smuggler.
then-
That's right. Okay,
yeah,
you're right.
so it's a little bit different.
I
Yeah,
remember now.
yeah, yeah. So the villains actually reminded me a little bit of the villains in the Farseer trilogy. Did any of you, besides maybe
Mhm.
Connor, did you guys? Okay, so you know how the villains in the Farseer trilogy are just like so black and white like this, and like
Yes.
it's really annoying. This is like the very same thing where it's just like, okay, so we're just like, you're gonna pour on every possible bad trait along with some like homophobia and fat phobia
What's
and
the
whatever.
Farseer trilogy?
And that's the
Robin
Robin
Hobb.
Hobb,
Like Artemis.
Assassin's Apprentice.
Is that
I
yes?
don't have any of them here.
Yeah, it was a very similar vibe to me of like, we're just evil for the sake of being evil. And then that's the other thing too. Oh my god! So with all of the Dune content, Paige, you might have heard some of this when you heard people talk about it too. Everyone's kind of like, so in the Dune world, like, you know, it's all these competing factions, and like no one's really the bad guy. And I'm like, I think the pedophile rapist is like probably the bad
There's
guy.
definitely a bad guy.
I do feel like the one that are abusing Native people, probably the bad guy.
Yeah.
But like I've watched
People
multiple people say that.
and took over, probably the
Yeah,
bad
the colonizers probably bad.
Okay. But even with House Atreides, like I know that we're supposed to like they're supposed to have our sympathy, and like I said, it worked in the fact that like they're walking into this trap, but they are still the colonizers.
They're still colonizers. They're just the
still
good
colonizers.
colonizers
Yeah.
because
Well,
they're not going to
even-
kill people anymore. And I was like, that no.
Yeah.
Absolutely
Even the
not.
Harkonnens, I don't know what their
Harkonnen.
names are.
Yeah.
Harkonnen that were there before, they were also taking
Horrible.
over the planet.
Yes. And like
Yes,
purposely
yeah.
brutalizing them as well.
I think like
Yes.
the main difference between like the good colonizer and the bad one was that like Paul's family was trying to help them with their goal of like making the planet habitable.
And they were also
somewhat.
their prophesied family.
But
that
then they like
would
started
have-
beating
Listen, we're
everyone.
gonna still mostly steal your resources.
Yeah.
but give you a little bit of
as a
money.
treat.
As
You
a
get
treat.
rights as a
like
treat.
a reward.
You get
Line-
rights as a treat.
The line in the movie where they're like, "You need to stay off our like you can't travel in the desert," and the guy was like, "Well, I am.
Well, I'm gonna go
this
to
is
the
my
desert."
fiefdom. This is my fiefdom, and I was given this planet, so I am going to go in the desert.
Yeah.
But I won't go into your homes."
Uh-huh.
I was like, "Oh my god."
Yeah.
I do
Like,
agree that Leto was nicer in the movie than in the book, because even in the book, like even Jessica was like, I like him most of the time, but sometimes
But he's
he's
also
like,
coded as like a
Uh-huh.
person of color in the film because it's played by Oscar Isaac. So that also adds to like the experience you're seeing, like these people who are coming in, like Duncan and Leto are like the ones who are nice
Mhm,
to them, and
mhm.
everyone else who's white is
Mhm.
being a traditional colonizer. It just felt like
Yeah,
very much
yeah.
like this is not being
and
handled well
in
at
this
all.
movie, Duncan and Leto also die.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, so I think that whole thing about like everyone's bad, like I actually like it if like everyone, you know, I love Morally Gray. I like it if everyone's kind of bad, but let's not pretend that the Harkonnens aren't like the actual villains. Like
Yeah,
let's don't be like, no, everyone's like kind of up. No, the pedophile rapist colonizers are in fact the worst one.
And the step up from there are the regular colonizers.
Right. It's just normal. So yeah, that whole argument of like, you don't really know who to pull for. Like I heard that in multiple Dune analysis and I was like, I think I do. Actually, I don't know. You know, lesser of two evils kind of situation.
Maybe I'm wrong, but were the how do you say their name?
Fremen.
Were they even from that planet?
I don't think like anyone's
It's
from,
from that planet.
anywhere kind of
I
thing.
think people like dumped them there and was like, survive with this
Maybe.
religion we've imparted on you.
And then they were like, oh, wait, that dust you got there is real
Uh-huh.
nice.
Real
Maybe they
nice.
like that. Yeah. Yeah, they're like Australia. Like maybe they were like a former like prison colony or something. Like, you know, like
Oh,
Yeah.
man. Good times. I mean,
I do have
were
a-
they good times.
I have a very specific movie question, just because
Okay.
I saw it in a glimpse of my screen, and I have a question. That one scene where it was like that black spider thing with like the hands that was crawling on the floor. What
What?
do we know what that was,
excuse
or was that
me.
just like in there to just be there?
I don't know. They're visiting you guys have made me second guess how to say the Harkonnens now. But
Harkonnens?
no, it's not Harkonnens. it's
Harkonnens?
Yeah.
Yeah, they say
Harkonnens?
Harkonnens in the film.
Harkonnens.
It was
Okay.
Harkonnens and Fremen. Like,
And the Reverend Mother, is that what her name is? That's what I've been calling her.
listen, we know who you mean.
Okay, okay.
What?
The Reverend Mother lady.
The woman
Oh.
who does the painting.
Yes, she goes
Yeah,
to
the
visit
box.
them, and there's like this like spidery latex creature in the background. And then the guy is like, no, he doesn't understand you. And she's like, leave us in the voice. And then the spider crawls away, and that's it.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not touched on.
Is that a
anymore.
pet? Like, what is
Yeah,
that?
it was a pet, I guess.
Oh my god, it was so disturbing. I was like, "What is that? That looks
I
like
don't
something
remember
from
that in
like
the
the
book.
like human centipede."
No,
Like,
I
what is
don't-
that?
Someone in the comments be like, actually, in Dune Book 6, that is this kind of thing. We're just referencing it for later. Like,
My mind
which
was
is probably
stuck
what
on
it
that
is.
for the rest of the movie. I was like,
latex
"What is the
spider
latex spider with the hands?"
Did y'all hear?
The spider actually represents an intense theme that he was sorry.
I'm not
So
gonna look
this-
it up.
The
This
latex
book is gonna
spider
be
is
too-
feminism. The presence of feminism in the Dune trilogy.
This book is going to be 2 films.
Oh
The
my God.
director
Right.
was saying he wants the second book to be a trilogy
The second,
book, the Doom Messiah or whatever the
Oh.
second one is.
Could be 3 movies.
Like like they're doing a TV show about the Bene Gesserit. Like they're
Do
making
people
this a
just-
franchise.
Do people just keep dying and so they can bring in new actors for each movie?
so no, apparently, so I have heard this and I'm gonna spoil it. So Duncan Idaho like comes back apparently. People
I
turn
figured
into,
that they
people turn into sandworms. Like there's like a whole thing going on.
they
They
kind of tease that because what's her face? One of the Reverend mothers.
mothers.
I don't know. They were talking about how like they found it was the wife of the like guy that the emperor sends to check on the fat
the like count people.
yeah,
whatever.
she's one of the Bene whatever they're called, and she's like, I don't trust that anyone's dead until I see a body, and so that just is
I
like,
mean,
okay,
same.
everyone you don't see them actually die comes back.
Yeah, same. I mean, that's also. I mean, is this the origin of that? Like, you don't think in sci-fi fantasy that anyone's dead until they're actually like dead? Because again,
yeah.
the son that apparently died. People are like, oh, so the miniseries on the Sci-Fi Channel follows the son. I was like, the son that died, that baby son.
Leto
That he
too.
had. Leto too. Yeah, apparently that's
Is
like,
that different than the one that she's pregnant with at the beginning of the book?
That's his
That's-
sister. Is
that's
a-
his
Is that the
sister.
daughter?
Who?
Yeah.
Oh, we didn't even talk about this. The creepy sister. I kind of like
I-
the creepy sister. I'm kind of down with her. Like she has some. She's like 3, and she's like, "Fuck you." Like I'm okay with her. Some of you didn't get that far. So there's this kid. So she does this like weird procedure thing, like where she becomes like the Reverend
she
Mother. of
becomes
the
a
sermon.
Reverend Mother. Yeah.
Yes, and the baby gets like
that all the-
altered. So
the
the baby gets.
paintings on her in the movie?
I don't
No,
know.
she in the
No, we
book
didn't
she
get this
takes
far.
in the book she
Uh-huh.
takes like a serum and it's poison, and then like she has to like go inside of herself and convert the poison.
But
And
the
so she
baby's
bec-
in there.
But her baby's in there, and they didn't know that. So then
Yeah.
there's a Reverend Mother who like imparts her life's wisdom into Jessica, and because she's also pregnant, the
It goes in the
fetus
baby.
also is imparted with all of the knowledge of both of them.
Okay.
Uh-huh. So she
So then
like is
she's
talking
born
as an
with
infant.
2 people's worth
Yeah.
of knowledge.
She's talking as an infant, like she's like one of their battle strategists, even though she's like 3. It's like, yeah, she's creepy, but she's kind of cool.
There
So,
there
like,
is
I'm
a
okay with
like a flash forward, like when one of his visions when he's in the tent in the desert where he sees his Jessica and the daughter, and they're like covered in these markings that are on, and they're like
That
have a
makes
cave
sense.
wall behind them.
Yeah. So because the book has a time jump of like 3 years, 2 or 3 years.
2 years. I think.
Between like the part that I liked and then the part where I'm like, what the fuck? Because all this time passes, Chami and him are like that she's like his concubine and they have a baby and like all this stuff. Like all of this happens in that time span that we don't get to see. So
It
yeah,
reminded me of has anyone read Aragon? Or,
Yeah.
like the series. So there's like the little girl that he kisses in that, and she basically is exactly like he ripped her out of this series
Yeah.
and dumped her into his own.
He was like what 14 when he wrote those books. Like
I will
so.
say that it's like really funny when you get to things that are classics like this, but that you're coming too late, and so you have like backwards like context for things.
yeah.
Like
Yeah.
we keep saying like, oh, like Game of Thrones, like Eric, but
Mhm.
I understand
It's
that
the other way
you
around.
did it first.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, totally.
I totally get it.
Well, it's like,
but it's
when I
so
was
funny
watching-
to like get, I don't know, do it backwards and see kind
Yeah.
of where it all started.
But watching
People are
the movie,
saying
I was
that-
like Star Wars vibes, and I'm like,
Yes.
wait, no, other way around.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
People are saying that what is her name? Aaliyah is the best part of the old movie. So maybe the old movie was what's up.
Good for
Apparently, the
Aaliyah.
old movie is a bunch of like people just having voiceovers. Like all of the
Oh, like,
like
in their head?
exposition is all voiceovers.
No.
And I want to watch it just about sounds absolutely chaotic.
Absolutely not. Absolutely
I
not.
thought about it, but actually after DNFing the book, I feel like I'm doomed out for a while. Like I need to
Sci-fi
discover-
miniseries too. If you want all the details, they said that one had like all of the everything in it, and it was very like slow paced because of it.
I thought that the movie now was slow paced, and it was. I don't know. I haven't read like what Dune fans feel about the Dune movie, like real fans. But I thought it was a really accurate adaptation.
The new movie, you're saying?
Yeah.
Yes, it was just like
They seem to be liking it. The Dune fans.
This is like wholesale, and everything they cut out was just the author going blah blah blah. They made like really good choices, and it felt very accurate. In fact, that's where I DNF'd, was when I caught up to the movie and the book, and I tried to keep reading, and I was like, actually, I don't care.
I'm gonna finish it now.
So I fully intend to like consume the Dune media like movie form. Like so, even though I'm like just going hard against this like in book form, I think the movie, like even though there's still some issues with it, and like yes, we can't completely remove it from the source material. There's still going to be issues. Like I still think that like the movie's going to give me what I want out of it, which is like the pretty visuals and like maybe probably adding some of the like the heart. Like you're gonna care about the characters more. Yeah, maybe so yeah, I'm fully intending to like continue with the movies as a thing.
Yes, Sam, I recommend going to see it in theater.
Okay,
if you feel comfortable
and getting your earbuds just like blown out.
Because here are the best things about it.
So I went to a theater to watch this.
Visual.
And it was so loud that so me and two of my friends went to watch it, and there was like a stranger sitting beside us because our theaters are fully open here now. He fell asleep within the first 5 minutes of the movie and snored the entire time.
Oh my God.
But you couldn't hear him snoring because this is not a quiet movie. It is always loud. There is always music. But the one moment where it was quiet, everybody turned to look at him because he was snoring so loudly.
Oh my God.
I will say that's the only thing I'm glad I personally watched it at home, because I took it in remission.
We watched it at home as well.
That too. That might be a little bit overstimulation for me.
2.5 hours.
2.5 hours. Yeah.
That's long.
I watched it at home, and it's one of those movies where the background music and sounds and stuff and the volume of the voices don't match. So you're like constantly turning the volume up and down to hear the voices.
And then it's like,
yes. It's that kind of movie. And so it was nice to be able to have it at home where I could turn it up and down as needed throughout the entire
I have
movie.
a sound bar and a sub, so I'll just like turn that on and get like a similar experience. But I can.
You will have the same experience in your living room. It's very loud.
Okay, because I don't know if I want to be like surrounded by it.
To be fair,
on the big screen probably would have been
the sandworm
already so pretty, and it's just like spectacle. So that's good for the theater. However, if you are somebody who the pacing might get to you, I'm so glad that I was able to go. I'm done with 1.5 hours of that.
Go to bed.
Back tomorrow.
I mean, we took an intermission to take Puppy out. So I mean, like if you need an intermission,
maybe. I'm so torn. Like, a part of me wants to just be like,
do not watch it at night. If you watch it in the afternoon when you're awake.
Like, I do picture there being like fans. I just with hot air. Like, I don't know. I just feel like that's what's going to happen, even though I know it's not. But every not Vine. God, someone said Vine in the comments. I didn't think of it. Every TikTok I've seen, people have been like, like as they're talking about the soundtrack. So I know it's going to be good.
Okay, here's speaking of TikTok, here's like a random observation. We're already in an hour, but that I have had nowhere to say. So everybody's gorgeous in this movie, as we have said 1,000 times. I personally am not a fan of Timothée Chalamet, like from
what he looks like.
Of what
he looks like he's dying of consumption.
Okay,
a Victorian boy dying of consumption.
My brain knows that he's a grown adult man, but it doesn't know that. He looks like a child. And so every time I see him, I'm just like, jail. And so when people are thirsting over him, I can't, like, whatever. But I keep seeing TikToks that are like, that sound is like, I'll fuck you and your dad. And I'm like, no, I'm at the age where I can't. I can only.
Oh my God, stop.
Yes.
No, Timothée Chalamet is a child.
He was so cute in this movie. He was like totally working for me with his broody
He's
little
supposed
like
to be 15.
He's 15.
I know, but the actor was working for me because I watched like 5 movies with him in it.
No,
I'm 35.
He's dying. He has had the flu for 3 years, Paige. Like, he needs fluids. Like, oh my God.
I mean, he was
God.
well cast as like
Totally,
the
'cause he could
broody
be a
Messiah
child.
in this.
A
Great,
child.
good for you. I'm just saying that for everybody making a TikTok about like, I will do you and your dad. It can't be me. I'm 35. I can only do the dad.
Right. But and Danny DeVito looks like a hot snack. Let me just say, since that first still got released where he's looking like this over his shoulder in his armor, it's a good looking man. Fine piece of man meat right there.
Yes.
I was very confused why I saw all of the like press release, like all
I
these
haven't
like
seen any
things with
pictures or anything.
Timothy Chalamet and
Hold
Zendaya
on.
together, and I'm like, why are these two in all of these things together? I'm so confused. Why are they always on like these interviews together? Didn't realize they were in this movie together.
I heard
Same
she's in
with-
it for like 2 seconds.
Same
7
with
minutes
Jessica,
at
the
the
woman
end.
that plays Jessica, and Oscar Isaac. People were like thirsting over them as like a couple together, and I was like,
Connor,
I
this
don't
is
get
the
it.
picture. This is the picture I'm
Okay.
talking about.
I didn't know they were in this movie
Iconic.
together either.
I've seen so many TikToks of him just spitting on the table, like slowed
Yeah.
down, like as a thirst trap, and I was like, y'all.
Uh-huh.
I mean, like, but also
Like, why do you keep seeing them, Maddie?
because I like the first one.
The
and I was
algorithm's
waiting
like, I
for
really
it,
like this.
you want to see Oscar Isaac spitting again? And I'm like, God, sure.
Same.
All right.
And on that note, I think
So yeah, that was a mess. We did our best. We knew we
did.
knew a lot of us would not make it through this book, and we were right. But
I mean, this morning I was at page 50, so I did good.
Wow.
you did a good job. You committed.
Good job.
Yeah.
Good job. Way to go, Connor.
Yeah.
I'm proud of you.
Connor. Nice.
Connor.
Nice. Okay.
Nice.
Our pick for November is Laura Olympus. So we're going to look at Sam.
I get to reread this one. Look at that. Ooh, I never did
I've
that.
never read it. Is it?
Oh,
I actually don't even know. Is there like a bind up now, or
there's
like
gonna be a bind up. I'm probably still just gonna go back on the webcomic, but there's gonna
It
be a
comes out
bind up
tomorrow.
of
The
So
bind
I'll
up comes
figure
out
out.
tomorrow.
Yeah, I'll figure out the like what episodes it goes through. I actually saw somebody dressed as Hades and Persephone, Laura Olympus, at a Halloween party last weekend. So perfect timing.
I'm very, very excited, interested, because I am a very harsh Hades and Persephone critic.
Same.
Sam is,
No,
so
I'm
harsh,
also
but also like fan.
a fan. Yes,
You
but,
have- you have,
I
like,
hate-
your
I hate
version that you
most-
love.
Yes, I hate
Yes.
most adaptations of Hades and Persephone. I'm usually like, huh, you're not doing a good job. This one
And
is like
Maddie
pretty-
hates all of them.
No, she's like the few. She's like the
There are
few.
some, I mean, I like them when they're like, actually, we're not going to do the kidnapping or the rape. And I'm like, great.
Yeah. This does not do the kidnapping and the rape. So and that's also what I don't like. Let's not do the kidnapping and the rape. So this is good in that way. And it's actually really like it's slow. Like we're gonna get probably like this comic started I think in like 2017 or 2018. We're probably only gonna get like that year's worth of episodes like in the bind up. Like they're not even close to them
So are we
possibly
saying?
even being together at this point in the
So
comic.
So are we just reading that portion to
The
talk
bind up.
about? Okay.
I think so.
That comes out tomorrow. I think that would be a fair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. We
Section
do.
two.
Yeah.
We're
Mhm.
deciding this as we go.
And then do we want to say anything about December? If we're planning anything, do we know what we're going to do for December so people can plan ahead for busy season?
Didn't we do last year like a look back on
Yes.
everything we did? Yeah. So
Yeah.
And
But
we
you
read a
guys-
Christmas book.
You
We
read a
did
Christmas
read the
book,
Christmas.
we read a Christmas book.
I read
yeah.
the first like 20 pages, and I didn't like it.
Maybe we'll do that again. for
Yeah,
fun.
we'll see if we can find a Christmas romance. If anybody
Mhm.
has one that you're like, you guys should read this one, we'll do that. But also in December, it's like a year, look back on our year. So we talk about all the things that we read for the book club, and we kind of rank and talk about favorites and least favorites, and we can talk about our reading year in general because
Mhm.
we were a little bit inconsistent this year with our book club.
We did it, but we just
we did
you know,
we did do it. I'm very proud of us. We
Yes.
still like cranked it out, like
Yes.
even when things got a little touchy there. So Laura Olympus in November, overview, maybe Christmas romance in December, And yeah, thank you guys so much for joining us. I had a blast. This is great.
Yes, this was fun.
This is better than the actual book.
Yeah, I can't believe I was the one that finished out of all of us. That's really exciting. Also, anyone watching this in the future who might be wanting to like criticize us, your criticism means nothing. I know it makes you cheer. So just think about that before you leave any shitty comments. But you can disagree with us, but just don't be like shitty. You know?
Yeah.
Well,
Right.
actually,
Be nice.
Yeah, let's just not. Let's just not. Okay.
On that note,
Bye.
bye.